Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Creative Writers and Illustrators. Today, I have four authors with me. All four are Penguin authors, and we are putting the spotlight on four books. One picture book, one chapter book, one middle grade, and one young adult. So the common thread which runs through all these books is disappearance. So Menaka, what disappears from Earth and appears in another dimension in your latest picture book?
Hi, Shamla. So I just got a new picture book out with Penguin. It's called Topi Rockets from Tumba. And so we have the picture book looks at how India launched its very first rocket from a small fishing hamlet in Kerala near Trivandrum called Tumba, and kind of catapulted this place, onto the national map. And so I have a rocket that gets launched from Tumba and then goes off into the sky and then reappears as well, of course, when it when it sends its cargo back safely to Earth.
Right. Vaishali, your book is all about conservation and protection to prevent certain species from disappearance. So what can you tell about your latest creation?
Well, Sitas Chitwan is a book about an 8-year-old girl, Sita, who wants to be a nature guide like her Baba in the Chitwan National Park in Nepal. And what disappears or appears in my book are a few things. There is Sita, who actually disappears at a point in the story because she's always in a rush to show things to tourists in the park. And at one point, she does not pay any heed to her father's advice, and she's gone. And she finds herself all alone in the forest. Then there is a tourist, a very old Japanese woman who gets lost. And they eventually meet, Sita and in a turn of events. And that's something to be read. And as you know, the book has two parts, that is fiction and nonfiction. In the nonfiction section, I cover a few species that are very integral to Chitwan National Park, and one of them is the clouded leopard. And it was last spotted in the 1800s in Chitwan, and then it disappeared from the face of the earth for over 150 years, after which they spotted it again in Chitwan in the 1900s, late 1900s. And till then they thought that the clouded leopard was extinct. And now it's a protected species there. So yes, few things appear, disappear, and we like these. I especially love this clouded leopard, an extinct species coming back and being protected now and growing in numbers. So that's the lovely thing.
Venita, you have some disappearing entities, right? There is a supernatural element in your latest book. So tell us more.
Well, as you can see, the book is called Dark Tales and it is full of ghosts. So you know what appears and disappears in these. It's a collection of 11 stories and they're all different kinds of ghosts in this. So if you want something to thrill you, this is a book. It's a young adult read, and I would really suggest that kids under 15 not read it because it is pretty scary.
Okay. Asha, your book literally has something missing, a very vital tool, right, from the kitchen. And it's this is Veena and Aunt Malu's second adventure. So can you tell us what appears, disappears, and leads to a lot of fun in your book?
Yes. So my new book is, let me give you a better look, A Pinch of Magic. And this is the second outing of Veena, 9 years old, and her Aunt Malu. Aunt Malu is a whiz with making herbal medicines. And she doesn't actually make it in her kitchen, but she actually has a very nice laboratory in which she makes it. But she has this very important measuring device called a pinching spoon, which measures a small pinch, and there's another spoon which measures a big pinch. And one fine day, her pinching spoon develops a crack. And she finds that many unexpected things are happening when she is using the cracked pinching spoon. So she has to buy a new pinching spoon. and she finds that the only person in the entire world who makes these pinching spoons has disappeared.
Right.
So she has Veena and Aunt Malu set out to track down this person and buy a new pinching spoon.
Right. So my the second question to you all is about inspiration. Asha, what inspired this book? You know, there's a bit of magic in the first book. There's a bit of magic in the second book, and what kitchen implement or what device kind of inspired you to create? Aunt Malu has got a whole lot of creation. So which physical object kind of triggered this creation?
Well, more than a physical object, it is, in ancient recipes, they always talk about using a pinch of this. And there's so many varieties of this. They'll say use a big pinch, use a small pinch. So I thought, why not convert this into a very modern technical thing? And so I decided to use the pinching spoon. And really, it's because of my fascination with the unexpected things which can happen with natural products. They're very, very powerful, but because they're natural, they can work in very unexpected ways. And that happens in book 1 as well. A product which is meant to do one thing suddenly starts doing something else.
That's right.
So that's what inspired me.
Right. Venita, you've written for young adults before, and you explored history, you've explored nature. This is the first time you are writing, the horror, writing, horror stories for the young adult. Is that right? The first time for young adults as an audience?
Yes, first time for young adults, but I have 3 books in this genre. The other 2 are for adults, and this is the first young adult book. And I can tell you what inspired me. What inspired me was really the headlines, because I wanted to scare all of India. I said, if I'm going to write scary stories, let's write scary stories that can scare everybody. So I said, what can I tap into that has to do with, a kind of a collective subconscious for the whole of India?
Yes.
And I looked at the things that we all found scary. And for example, there's the Nirabhaya case, which I think every woman in India found terrifying. There's the Upkar cinema case, where in Delhi, people went to watch a movie and they ended up being burnt alive. There's the Nithari case. Unfortunately, the headlines in India are mostly terrifying. Right. So I used all of these as backdrops for the supernatural. I took all of this. So hopefully, if I've done my job right, I will scare the whole of India.
I hope so too. Vaishali, there are 104 national parks in India, right? And yet you chose to put the spotlight on the first national park of Nepal. Why?
Right. So, as a family, we are wildlife enthusiasts. For the last 12 years, I don't remember a single year we've not been inside one forest or another, whether it's in India, whether it's in Nepal, whether it's in Africa. And while we go on safaris, Chitwan was the first national park that we did on, foot, as in we walked the entire day for over 12 hours inside the forest, having close encounters with animals, and that experience, I felt that forest in my veins. And Chitwan also has a very rich history. All national parks actually have a history. They were never national parks to start with. They were always something else. They were either hunting grounds, or they were used for agriculture, or they were parts of a village where there were some species that were caught in conflict and they went endangered, and then suddenly people woke up to the fact that they need to be that place needs to be conserved and protected. So, and Chitwan has a very rich history. It was a royal hunting ground. Nepal, as we know, was never literally colonized. And when India and the other countries were being colonized by the British, and as a strategy against it, they invited the VIPs like the Prince of Charles and all the other Dutch and the Danes to Nepal to hunt. And as a result of which, tens of hundreds of tigers and rhinos were being hunted on a daily basis. and more than 95% of the population dwindled. And there were only a handful of tigers and rhinos left when, a British naturalist, came into the picture and said, nothing doing. We need to stop all this, and we need to start conserving this place. And, so I thought, for many reasons, I really felt the forest, and while everybody will say, okay, this is a national park, these are all national parks, every national park is different from the other. So Chitwan was special in one way. Secondly, I thought children in India also could get to know about a national park from a neighboring country, and also it talks about Kaziranga and other national parks in India which are bordering Nepal. So yeah, it was a mix of both. I wanted to children to understand that how forests are different and how they are same as well. And yeah, so that's why Chitwan was a very conscious choice. I've also written about Tadoba and Gir, and those stories are available in CBSE textbooks. But yeah, Chitwan was special.
Yes. Menaka, I know a photo inspired this book. Can you show us the photo? Now, I think hundreds and thousands of people saw this picture when it appeared on social media. And for me, it was the primitiveness of the bicycle being, the bicycle being a part of something so huge, being part of the space program. So what captivated you to write this book when you saw this picture?
So my editor at Penguin sent me this photo and said, and just a link to an article, and said, what do you think about this? And I'd never seen the photo before that. So I missed the whole social media hubbub around this picture, I guess, when the articles came out. But I think for me, there's just something so wonderfully simple and earthy, and it just feels just so lovely when you see this picture. These two scientists pushing a cycle along in this, rural village, and they've got a really important part of a rocket strapped to the pillion, and they're pushing it to take it to the launch site. And that's the nose cone of the rocket where the payload is. And I didn't know all of that when I saw the picture, but I just thought, how wonderful, because at the time when India wanted, Nehru got Dr. Homi Bhabha and Dr. Vikram Sarabhai and all these amazing scientists, and and they all said we need to have our own space program. We were a very young country. There were all sorts of problems happening in the country. There was poverty. There were all sorts of issues, and in spite of all that, to say that we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this because it's important. It's important for the future of our country, and then the way in which they did that, with cycles and at some point bullock carts, and it was just this really wonderful can-do feeling and spirit about the whole thing, which of course I realized as I read more about this time and about Dr. Sarabhai, who plays an important role in the book. So yeah, I think for me, there was just something so arresting about that image. And I thought, how can you not see that and not want to know more about what the story behind it is?
So my next question is on research. Venita, all writers do research when it comes to our books, but yours has so much of supernatural element, So what kind of research did you do for this book? Did you meet any ghosts, or did you, use the Ouija board to invite some of them and share their stories? How was the research for this book? Or did you stick to your imagination and use the headlines from newspapers?
I must tell you that I have used a board when I was in hostel. All we girls used to sit and try and do planchette and call up spirits. So one has done all of this, but the only research I really did was my family history. My family is just full of ghost stories. I cannot tell you the huge fund of ghost stories that my family has. They're all convinced that ghosts exist, and various uncles and aunts will take you aside and tell you these stories that they say really happened. So I grew up like pretty darn scared. I grew up scarred for life because my mother used to light a single candle whenever there was a power cut, and she'd tell us ghost stories. So that was my research, being brought up petrified. I'd listen to my mom tell those stories, and we'd be so scared, and we'd be clinging to her, and we'd still be fascinated. We didn't want her to stop. So I really thought that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to tell stories that have people fascinated and terrified, and they don't want me to stop. So that's it, really. I think it's when you're in the realm of ghosts, you're really making it up as you go along, because nobody can confirm whether they exist or not exist. They are in a twilight zone. So you take yourself where your imagination takes you. But I did try to root it to reality by using, in the background is all issues and events that are very real to India and which are very scary. You've even got like the Naxal movement is in the book. There's a feticide in the book. There's all kinds of things in the book that are very real. And therefore, when you add a layer of the supernatural and a layer of your imagination to what is real there, you're hoping that the reader will buy that as being entirely real. Because, who knows? Ghosts, who knows? I don't.
Right. Asha, did you go through a lot of product catalogs while creating the right tool, right product for Aunt Malu's adventures?
No, I didn't really go through product catalogs because I tried to make them as different and unique and fantastic as possible. But the kind of research I did was like after the book, my editor had agreed on the book, I had to keep checking a lot of things. For instance, if there are I had initially just chosen the names of trees, Korati Kanjiram and all that. Then I had to research to see whether all these trees could exist in the same forest. So I had to do things like that. And because I know that children are bound to Google stuff, I relied more on my imagination, just generally keeping the broad things in place. So if I said that, you had a ginger flavored something for the throat, I know that ginger can be used for the throat. So I had to kind of research and validate everything that was in the book after I wrote it.
Menaka, your event, the launch happened in a pre-internet era. So was it easy to, do the research? I checked your Insta today, and there were, you had shared a whole lot of books which you had used for research. But in terms of, there's a lot of info in your book. It's a mix of fiction and non-fiction. So was it easy to do research? Was it like, did you get access to official documents and, were you just overloaded with information? Because this is like the first time this event was happening and everything was in place.
Right. So this was my first time tackling non-fiction, even though it's kind of creative non-fiction. It's a fictional look at the months and the year leading up to the launch of this rocket. I think because ISRO has, and this is kind of one of the earliest events, and a couple of years after this is when ISRO was formally set up in the country. Because ISRO is such a huge part of the country, and because so many eminent scientists, many of whom were a part of this, initial launch, including our former president, Dr. APJ Kalam, because I think so many eminent scientists and eminent researchers and institution builders and leaders were a part of it. You do find mention of this particular period of time in Indian history in books that they have written later on in their careers once they've retired and things like that. So I think while, and there are, it finds mention even in Shamim Padamsi and Lavanya Karthik's picture book biography of Dr. Kalam. So while this incident was there, it's a really small, it's a small part of a much bigger story, of course, but it's a very fascinating part. So I think I did have, for me, it was kind of important also to, Dr. Sarabhai is a part of the story. He's this character who flits in and out of the book. It was really important for me to get a sense of who he was and what kind of person he was and how people felt about him. I read Dr. Aravamudan's book about his time in ISRO, Dr. Manoranjan Rao, some other picture books. So all of these kind of helped me get a sense of that time, how people felt, what they were thinking. And then, of course, there were just so many people on the internet who were just wonderfully helpful. I really wanted to put, for example, I'll share this one story. I really wanted to put in, ISRO today, and I think after the, the launch of of a number of orbits in the last couple of years, we all know the women of ISRO, right? They've become these iconic figures in the media. And I really wanted to know, were there women, who are a part of this particular launch in 1963? And I couldn't find that information anywhere. So then I put out this, tweet, and I got in touch with Nandita Jairaj, who runs the wonderful Lab Hopping. She put me in touch with someone whose uncle used to work at ISRO at that time. And then and I found out from him, and he said, sadly, no, that was a time when we didn't have so many female scientists at ISRO who weren't a part of this. So I think it was a mix of, reading articles. People sent me papers, research papers to read. So many, people were very, very generous in sharing resources and their knowledge and time. So I interviewed a bunch of people. So yeah, it all kind of came together. I think the hard thing, and I'm sure, Vaishali also knows this, is when there's so many wonderful things you want to include. And you're always kind of pulled between, oh, should I keep this in, or should I put that in? And I think that's the tussle in trying to write, a nonfiction or a creative nonfiction book. But I really enjoyed the time I had in reading and researching before I sat down to write.
Hey, Vaishali, you had access to primary sources more than the secondary sources, right? So was it easy? How was your experience? Because we don't know much of Nepal. I know you did go there personally to the Chitwan Park, but how was your whole experience of just gathering the entire information and putting it together for the book?
So I wrote the story of Sitas Chitwan just when my walk ended. So we were on our way back from the forest. The last thing we did was the Gharial breeding center over there. And then we walked to our Jeep, all absolutely exhausted. And we sat in the Jeep. And the story was already playing in my head because Man Bahadur plays Sita's Baba in the book. Man Bahadur was actually my nature guide in Nepal. And so I just had to write it down. So I picked my phone, I opened notes, and I started typing the story out. And I knew that I wanted to do this book, whether I find a publisher or not. And the moment I reached the resort, they had a little library. So I went there, I sat and I looked through all the books that I could over there. I spoke to the manager over there, tried to get information, because immediately when I want to do a nonfiction book, I start making a mental note of what all I want to include in the book. I want to talk about the history of the book. I want to talk about the culture, the people that live in and around it. What is the flora, the fauna, the topography? Then which are the endangered species? What are the conservation practices? What has worked? What has not? And just coming back to what Menaka just said, there is always a tussle of keeping what we, between what we want to keep in the book and what we unfortunately have to show that restraint and put in a deleted folder. This Sitas Chitwan was about 12,000 words, and I had to edit it down to 4,000. So there is 8,000 words of information locked, that couldn't reach the readers. But yeah, research excites me. I've got a few books here. So yes, then I went to all the official websites on Chitwan National Park. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So I got some information from UNESCO. Social media is such a great thing, right, when it comes to reaching out to people. So I got in touch with a conservation scientist, Samantha Hill, from Wisconsin, who had been in Nepal for many years. And she knew Chitwan like the back of her hand. He put me in touch with Doma Podel, who's the first female nature guide of Nepal. And contrary to popular belief, people think this book is based on her true life, on the life of Doma Podel, but it's not. I wrote and submitted the manuscript way before I met her. And it was just a beautiful coincidence that I got in touch with her, and I've included a wonderful interview in the book. I also got in touch with Radha Wagle, who's a joint secretary of the Ministry of Forests and Environment in Nepal. She gave me a lot of leads. She was very kind and generous in information. And of course, I read a lot of books. I have with me, not a lot has been written on Chitwan, but these are books and a lot of encyclopedia on wildlife of the world, and just to capture some important species information on them.
Yes.
So yeah, going down the rabbit hole is, you can go so deep, but it's fun, it's exciting, to tell children, some fascinating things that even we didn't know. And it's exciting. Research is exciting.
Yes. So we've come to the end of our session, and I would like to tell our viewers that all these 4 books have been published by Penguin. If you'd love to read them, please connect with your local bookseller or reach out to any of the bookstores and place a pre-order. So we just have 20 seconds each. So can we do a round of quick promotion?
Oh God.
Yes, quick.
Who's going first?
So Venita goes first.
Okay.
Okay, so if you like to be scared to death, this is the book. Read it and don't read it in the dark. That's all I can say. Next.
Vaishali?
Quickly.
Sitas Chitwan. It's not just a
Light,
walk in Nepal.
just bring it to the center. There's too much of light fall. Yes, that's good. Yeah.
Not just a walk in Chitwan's, Nepal's first national park. It's a book not just about a girl who, takes you on an adventure in Chitwan. It's a book that will generate a lot of compassion and empathy for wildlife and forests. And hopefully once you put the book down, you will want to do something to make our planet more sustainable and work towards conservation and sustainability.
Right.
Thank you.
Asha?
So both these books are chapter books for early readers. So, and if you want your child or your student to fall in love with reading by reading a book with mystery, adventure, humor, fun, go for them.
Right. Minka, first and the last. Yes, please.
Okay, so if you know a young person who has been watching India launch all sorts of missions and orbiters and satellites and all sorts of things into outer space in the last few years, and you'd like them to know about how it all got started out many, many, many years ago, I do hope that you will hand them a copy of Topi Rockets from Kumbha, which I wrote and which Annada Menon illustrated.
Right. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.